Welcome to the Women's Fitness and Health Revolution podcast. There is so much noise on the interweb these days about what women should and shouldn't be doing when it comes to their fitness and health. Not only is it all too often tied to shame and fixing our bodies, it can also be incredibly detrimental to our health and wellness overall. The Women's Fitness and Health Revolution podcast sorts through the BS and offers advice and actionable tactile steps to support and build a better relationship to your amazing body through every stage of womanhood. It aims to break the cycle of keeping women in the dark about their extraordinary machines and revolutionize the way we move, eat, and live so that our daughters and our daughters' daughters look in the mirror and feel exactly what they are: fierce, beautiful, and capable of everything. The revolution starts here. Hello, and welcome to the Women's Fitness and Health Revolution podcast. My name is Coach Kinsey, and I am so excited to be here with you, as always, to chat all things our bodies, our health, our best lives. So today I'm trying something a little new and different, and if we hate it, that's okay. We'll be back to our regularly scheduled program next week, but life has been pretty cuckoo-cuckoo in the best way possible over on this side of the world. We've had a lot of visitors, which is really exciting. We had a really close friend of ours visit from New Orleans for a full week, and as soon as she rolled out after a really lovely week together, my aunt and uncle, who I haven't seen in many a years, visited from Hawaii. So it's been kind of go on top of all the regular life things. So normally when I do these podcasts, I like to sit down and write them out. I like to script them because if you know me, you know I can talk and talk and talk. Tangents are kind of my middle name, and we just have, it's good for me to have something that keeps me on base. Plus, that way I can do what I find most important, which is bring you well-researched points of view. I was going to say arguments, but I like to think that this is just information. When it comes to women's health, I just want you, as you know, to have all of the info so you can make your own best informed decisions that will be lifelong decisions that you can take for just, like I said, your overall best life. But today, like I said, a little off script, and the theme of today is I just had a birthday yesterday, and by the way, so did my Papa D, so happy birthday to Daddy Diamond. But it had me thinking. I, first of all, am not that person, even though I'd like to be, who sits back and takes like deep time to reflect. Sometimes I do. I try to meditate, but as much as I'd like to be the person who journals and sets up things for new moon rituals and all these things that are like pipe dreams for me, I haven't really gotten to that phase of my life where I can sit down and chill for quite that much. But I do like to just sort of think about things like at the new year, at birthdays, just sort of take a pause and see maybe what over the last year I like what's happened. And then in this case, I really got to thinking because I did a workout on my birthday, and I did a post earlier this week on Instagram about all the things I used to do or think that fitness and health was, and how terrible they made me feel, and things that just left me with lifelong repercussions that were not the healthiest. And it made me think about how much I have changed and grown when it came to taking care of my body, to what fitness meant, what nutrition meant. It's really come a very long way in the, well, now, 2 decades that I've been moving and shaking my body. And so I just figured, as just a little one-off, we could try a little reflection episode. If, like I said, you're not into it, feel free just to skip this one. And if you are, I think that it will probably hold some nuggets because I've worked with folks for decades, and I've talked to a lot of people who are at various phases that I used to be in. There's going to be a little bit of myth busting here. You'll get to know a little bit more about me. So if you're ever like, what is this chick's deal? Now's an episode that you're going to hear a little bit about my deal. So just to take us way back, I was not an athletic child. I played recreational sports
And it was mostly because my parents wanted us to be active, thank goodness. And it was a great way. All my friends did it. So I looked forward to seeing them, but I was not good. I was very competitive, but I did not have the skill to back up the competition. And I just was not exercise for sure was not my thing. Fitness was not my thing. I was on the ski team in high school, and we would have to run around the lake when there wasn't snow, and my family lives off the lake. So instead of running around the lake, I would sneak up with my friend Caitlin, because it would be around like the Thanksgiving time, because it was in the winter. We'd run up and literally, while we were supposed to be running laps, would eat French silk pie on my porch. Like, I was just not a person who liked to work out. And I actually ended up quitting that ski team, much to my parents' chagrin, because they bought me skis, and I'm so sorry, parents. I quit it so that I could do more musicals. So that is kind of my background. When people, look at me, and sometimes I get the, well, it's easy for you. You have been doing this your whole life. It is not the case. I have not been doing this my whole life. It was actually kind of like a joke in my family that I ended up going into fitness, and it was absolutely just one of those moments where the universe had other plans for me. But my plan was never to I didn't study fitness in college. Everything that I've learned has been through NASM and continuing education. It's been decades since I've learned all that. But like I said, I went to college for musical theater. My goal was not to be fit for a long time. It was to be thin. Not healthy, but thin. And that's sort of where my relationship to exercise started, which is why I feel so passionately now about doing my darndest to disrupt diet culture and to help bring facts to women about the dangers of giving in to things like yo-yo dieting and starvation and over-exercise, and help to provide tools that actually help to promote health and longevity and healthy bodies. When I was about 17, I think, senior year, a little bit before, probably 16, I started dabbling in anorexia. I got really into my head. I was a teenage girl. We all probably can relate to growing up with this society of letting us know that we're never enough and comparing ourselves, and just for the record, I want to call this out too, because I feel like one of the biggest disservices with eating disorders is that we just talk about it for women, but I've also worked with and known a lot of men who struggle with eating disorders. Body dysmorphia is across the board. No one gets off unscathed when it comes to a diet culture that tells us we're not good enough. And I really fell victim to that. It just sort of started presenting itself when I was a kid, 16, and then by the time I was 17, 18, I was deep in starvation mode, to the point where I ended up in an outpatient program. I dropped to my lowest weight. I thought I was the biggest I had ever been. I was sad and alone. I counted calories religiously. I could walk down the aisles of a supermarket and tell you without flipping over a box what every single calorie was, because every time I went to the grocery store, I flipped those boxes around hoping that the calories would drop. I got to the point where I would only eat a bag of popcorn a day, and I'm so sorry, I should have done a trigger warning about this, but I promise there's hope on the other side. The point was, I was really in it. And thankfully, I had parents who were really supportive, and they got me into that out treatment program. So by the time I went to college, I had at least awareness that I was sick, or at the very least that I was experiencing something that may be not in line with reality. So they were able to help me get help with a program here in Minnesota called the Emily program, which is still here. And if you are struggling, it is in different parts of the country, definitely find help, because there are real solutions out there, and they just get better and better every year. There's also free solutions if you don't have healthcare. There's an organization called OA, Overeaters Anonymous. That's really a beautiful thing to check out for support. The point is, there's a lot of support out there. So I went into college sort of knowing that I had anorexia. And even that knowledge, it was still so scary in my brain that I wasn't free of it yet. I was aware of it, but I wasn't free of it. And that's when I ended up finding exercise for the first time. We had a gym in my college, and I started running. So I would look at the calories on the treadmill, and whatever I got on the treadmill, I would let myself eat that amount of calories in the day, which, by the way, that is not how it works. And the repercussions have been pretty desperate, or they've lasted with me a long time. I'm still getting over gut issues from things that I set up when I was a kiddo. The point here is that when I was first introduced to exercise, it is like so many people that I've worked with in the past. I was just constantly trying to get thinner. I was never small enough. I was never where I wanted to be. Even when I would hit a weight goal, it was not enough for me. It was chasing the not enoughness. I started to find group fitness in college, and I loved it, but I wasn't ready for it. I liked that the treads showed me calories, and that's all I thought mattered. I was, like I said, a victim to diet culture where, like so many people I've worked with, the focus was on calories in, calories out, and burning more than you took in, which again is just not how it works. Our bodies burn so many calories at rest just to exist. We need food to fuel our body. I, of course, was not thinking about things like protein at the time. I wasn't really thinking about anything. I was just doing this flying blind. I had no resources about nutrition or fitness. I just was following what I saw everyone else doing, or read in magazines, or saw on the interweb. So it was a pretty disconnected, miserable start to fitness. Again, like so many people I've worked with, my sort of MO behind it was to fix my body. And again, this is why now looking back, I've become so passionate about helping people change the narrative of trying to fix ourselves to working with ourselves to take care of ourselves. So fast forward, in Los Angeles, I ended up falling into a gym job. So this is about 6 years later, maybe a little less. My restaurant closes. I was in restaurants. I was still running as my primary fitness, and I was still kind of struggling with the calorie counting. I fell into a job in a gym because my restaurant closed and a gym down the road was hiring, and suddenly I found group fitness in a big way, and I loved it. I was surrounded by people who were doing things I wanted to do, and in that day and age, they looked the way I wanted to look, because again, I was still coming from that external fix-it. And while it wasn't the best motivation that got me started, I did start falling in love with how I felt, and I wouldn't change that for anything. It also got me lifting weights for the first time. So I had a big shift away from the like cardio bunny, which I hate that phrase, but the go, 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 lose weight and run mentality, and into a little bit more weightlifting. And I just do want to say that we'll talk about this too in the overexercising in just a second. But the one thing is that I was still very much into a couple of myths that I hear all of the time. And we'll do a myth busting episode, but I was under the impression that more is better, that no rest days was the way to go. And I was still under eating and not thinking about things like protein. And even when I started coaching a couple years later, I was sort of like the do as I say, not as I do mentality. Because obviously when I learned how to coach, I realized that rest days were important, but I couldn't quite put the pieces together that pertained to me. I was still really afraid of gaining weight. I still had that old body dysmorphia in the back of my head. I was really afraid of food still. I was just afraid that if I took a rest day, all of my gains would go away. I had all of these fears, all of these rules that somehow throughout my life had slowly started planting themselves, and I had no idea. I just had such deep fear. And so I was teaching, but I was training all the time. I was still not really taking rest days. Sometimes I would do doubles or triples. And on the outside, I would get a lot of praise. Like people would be like, oh my gosh, you work so hard. And you did 2 of these classes? I can barely get through 1. So I was also getting all this affirmation from the outside. And what I didn't realize until honestly around the pandemic, when I was forced to pull back, was that my body at this point, because now I'd been doing it for almost 10 years, my body was falling apart. I was sleeping horribly. I was losing hair. I was not tracking my period, but I bet they were irregular. I had tons of pain with my period, and I was just so anxious all of the time. And I was also now shifting my anorexia into alcoholism. I struggled with that for many years. I'm coming up on 6 years sober, but this was the part of my life where alcohol sort of took the place of starvation, because instead of feeling like I was in control, it helped me let go of control. And at this point, I was so detached from myself from years of punishing myself with exercise and starving myself with food and still never feeling like enough. I was in Los Angeles to act. So everywhere I went, I was comparing myself and thinking that nobody had anything better to think about than the shape of my body. And I just had created this tiny world where I was obsessed. Sorry, I'm sharing a room. I was obsessed with my body. I was obsessed with food. I was obsessed with exercise. And that meant not only was I becoming super unhealthy and unwell, but also my world was closing in to just me. It was the loneliest time of my life. I started losing friendships, not even losing, I just didn't nurture them. They were always there, and I have such amazing friends, and I'm so grateful on this other side. But I just have seen a lot of people fall into this, which is why I feel like it's important part of the story. But other things in my life stopped mattering. I was so obsessed with food and exercise. It was literally all I could think about. When I was hanging out with friends, I was thinking about what we were going to eat or worried about what we were eating. When I was doing my workout, I was thinking about when my next workout was. Or when we were going on vacation, I was just panicking about like where I could get the food that I needed, or how was I going to exercise, or if I didn't exercise, God forbid, what would that mean? Point is that my brain, my world became so small, and I was there alone with me, and I didn't really like me very much at that time because, like I said, like so much of what diet culture teaches us, I was just constantly the problem. I could never get to where I wanted to be because where I wanted to be kept changing. And that's a hard place to be. And I think we underestimate, even if we're not there exactly, because that was a pretty extreme case, even if we're not necessarily in that headspace all the time, when we approach even just one workout from a place of punishment or worry if we skip a workout or fear around what we eat, or I hear it all the time, like I'm going away for the weekend, so I need to make sure that I exercise now so I can eat whatever I want. When we start to do that, even if we're not doing it at the level that my brain got to, we are creating these rules for ourselves, and we're creating these beliefs that things are unsafe and that we are not worthy of things unless we do this, that, or the other. We are setting basically these quiet agreements with ourselves that we're only worthy of food if we do this, or we're failing if we do that. And like I said, it doesn't have to be a huge, every moment of everyday thing to still stand in the way of connecting to just how incredible we are and what a miracle it is that we get these bodies and this one life. And we lose moments of being present with our loved ones. I looked back on it, and one of the things that I was thinking about yesterday were the years that I have kind of memory gaps just from being so obsessed in the moment that I have very little recollection of other things that were going on. And that's a bummer, but it's also a good reminder to me now why I want to continue working on creating and cultivating this loving relationship of myself, and also why it's so important to stay of service to others and present with others and get out of my head. So I know we're kind of waxing on, but again, this is my life story, so it's a little bit longer. About 6 years ago, everything changed for me. I got sober, and through the grace of the universe, met an incredible group of people. I do use a program still to this day that helps me stay sober, because nobody understands alcoholism like a bunch of alcoholics, and having a group that supports you through it and tools that help you reprogram your brain, my life has fully changed. And as I started getting sober, I started being able to take responsibility for some of the things that had gone wrong in my life. I started to recognize patterns of thought, especially as they pertained to fitness and nutrition. I could notice where things were becoming a little more obsessive. As I got sober, I started to feel my body when I overexercised. I started to pull back a little bit and add those rest days, and I started noticing in real time, and it was very scary. It is scary to start taking rest days. So if you are in that position where you are afraid to take a break, I do have a whole other podcast where we talk about rest days, because it was a very real hump to get over. And it wasn't until I was on the other side feeling the benefits of not exercising all the time that I realized just how important they are. On top of coming back like so much stronger when I do come up to my workouts, I was sleeping better. I wasn't losing hair every day when I would shower. My gut started, I still have gut problems because I did a lot of damage and I'm like seeing a gastroenterologist, but a lot of years of anorexia will do that to you. But they're less bad than they used to be. My life started to change. And now I do 2, 3. If I need a 4th rest day, I take my rest days, because one of the things I've learned that I talk about all the time here is that fitness really is that lifelong journey. So pulling out to that 30,000 foot view was something that getting sober taught me, and I immediately started shifting it into fitness. And I shouldn't say immediately, but I started shifting it into fitness. And now that's really the world that I live in, is 30,000 foot view. Like, is this something, I'm scared right now, but is this something that in the future will make it more sustainable to my body? Or if I do it, will I set myself back? I also, as I got sober, started to, like I said, feel better in my body. And as I started feeling better in my body, and this is one thing that I love about working with people as they get into fitness, I see this beautiful thing happen where they start taking care of their body with their fitness, and suddenly they start wanting to know how to support it nutritionally. It just sort of is a snowball of lovely things. And support it nutritionally is different to me than dieting. So I really, for the first time in my life, got into functional nutrition, started learning about things like protein and quality of foods and building a plate full of many colors and fibers. And I'm not talking about counting macros. I'm just talking about how I learned about how food was fuel and not a scary thing. And it took a lot of years to rewire, but now I have been able to shift into intuitive eating. My goal is to hit my protein marks. I know I talk about it all the time, so I'm eating a lot more protein. Protein actually took me a really long time to get. It is hard to get started, and especially if you're busy, it's hard to prioritize, but that's one thing in the last 2 years I've really been getting in on. My longer journey is I did a big shift. I used to be a fast food queen, if you can believe that. And now the majority of my food are those whole foods. But the other big thing that's shifted that kind of flies in the face of that is that I've let go of the mentality of good and bad foods. And the reality is there are definitely some folks who need to hit pause on some foods, especially if you are experiencing certain gut issues or you have food sensitivities. But for me, I was gluten-free and dairy-free for many years, and now I've been able to work things back in, like gluten, with no problem. So I have started letting go of the idea of like, oh, I can't have a burger, otherwise I throw it all away. I go to trivia every week, and every week that I'm at trivia, I let that just be the meal where I have a little fun with it. And if another night comes up where that happens, I don't freak out about it. For me, and this is huge after decades of literally counting every calorie that went into my mouth. Now I just sort of trust with that 30,000 foot view that the majority of the time I'm making choices that support my body, not to fix it, but because I like the way I feel when I'm eating these foods. I like to not feel sick to my stomach. I like to have energy. I like to not sugar crash. I like to not feel inflamed. And I'm eating a lot more food than I used to. I eat 3 very big meals a day, and I have snacks alongside, especially when I am busy. So that's been a huge thing that's changed for me. My exercise has also changed hugely. Even as a fitness professional, my own workout is just a very small part of my life. So much of my world now goes towards programming for my clients. So much of my world now goes towards being with my family, prioritizing time we moved to Minnesota, make time to call my friends back in Los Angeles and stay connected. I'm still working on that. I'm very bad at phone calls. So if you're listening to this, just know I'm thinking about you. But what used to be the things that I thought about all the time are now just tiny pieces of a much larger puzzle. And it happened so slowly. These things are, I talk about habits all the time, and we have a couple other podcasts that are worth going back and listening to, but habits are so funny because they feel so hard at first when you're getting started. It can feel almost impossible to put something new into place. But when you do just little bits, one at a time, and you pause 6 years later and look back at how far you've come, it's hard to believe that you weren't this way all along. So for me, my little pieces were, I got sober. That for me was a big one. I just had to do it. Many people can drink, I cannot. Getting sober was the first little domino. And after about 6 months of that, I was feeling pretty good with that, still staying in my program to this day. And that's when I started adding that nutrition piece. And then very slowly, I started working in other things. It was like I didn't do it all at once. I didn't even do it for a long time. But when I started making these healthy choices, it's now been 6 years of making these little choices. And now the healthy choices that I make for myself look so different than they used to. My last year really was a big focus on learning about women's health and hormones, because we are so amazing and have so much going on and are taught so little about our bodies. And in that journey, I've really learned to get honest with myself about my stress levels. I've learned to get really honest with myself about my workaholic tendencies. I think similar to diet culture, we live in a society that really pats you on the back for go, go, go. And the second you don't go, 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 there is sort of this expectation that you're either go, go, going, or what are you even doing? And so it's been a really hard shift for me to remember that life is so much more. Just like I had to learn life is so much more than exercise and calories. Now I have to learn that life is so much more than work. So it's been a huge shift for me to focus on balancing personal time and being okay with stepping away from work. I've pulled back a lot on I pulled back a lot on things that I do outside of work too. Like I've always been building my business, but just being mindful that I'm getting time at 6 p.m. every night. I shut down what I'm doing no matter what, unless I'm teaching. And I spend time with my family, with my fiance, with my parents, with my sister, with my cat and my dog. I just create these quality relationships, because as I get older, I realize that really is what fills my cup in a way that nothing else does. The other big thing this last year has really taught me is, and I heard it, I wish I could remember off the top of my head what his name was, but I was listening to a podcast. It's called Strength Training for Women. It's an amazing podcast. Definitely recommend checking it out. They did a replay episode with, nope, not going to come to me. Anyway, the gentleman they were interviewing mentioned a priority for him where he calls it pay yourself first, which profit first from a business owners out there. It's kind of like that. Pay yourself first in his mind is prioritize your sleep over everything, no matter what. Get you 7 hours of sleep. And that has been a big change for me. That's another thing in the pandemic that I learned how important sleep was. For many, many years, I opened gyms, so I would stay up really, really late, and then I'd wake up at 4 a.m. and I'd do it over and over and over. And it was similar to anything else you do for a long time. You don't even realize there's a different way to live or feel until you're not doing it anymore. And then the pandemic happened, and I had no gym to open. I was just teaching one class online, and it didn't have to start until 9. So I was suddenly getting 8, 9, 10 hours of sleep, and I felt like a human again. And as soon as that happened, I kind of had an aha moment of, oh my gosh, I can never sacrifice my sleep like this again. And now at 36, my whole last year was really focused on making sure that I'm getting those 7 to 9 hours of sleep. And at the same time, while I was figuring that out, I also started dealing with insomnia for the first time. So it's just been kind of a learning journey of how do I prioritize that. And some things for me that have really been beneficial are things like putting away my phone and all screens at least an hour, maybe 90 minutes before bed. I started drinking tea before bed, like an hour or so before, so I can pee. I use melatonin. I forget what it's called. I always say glyphosate, but that's what pesticides are called. Starts with a G. Catch me another time. We'll talk about it. I've started using a sleep aid called Somnolin that is all herbs. I just do one with 2 hits of magnesium, and that's been really helpful. I started doing yoga nidra, which I think I've talked about on this podcast before. That has changed my life. I do that during the day too because I'm a bad napper. But the point is that this journey is never over. And this was an episode that felt important to me because, like I said, time feels like it moves so slowly when it's happening. And then you look back and the years have flown by. And I think it's so important, whoever we are, wherever we are, to take a second to appreciate how far we've come and to notice how much we've grown, even if it feels like not a ton. When we really give ourselves the opportunity to look back, it's amazing how much we grow. And I'm so excited to see how my fitness changes, how my life changes, right? Because who I was 6 years ago, who I was 10 years ago, it was nothing. I would never have guessed this would have been where my life is. And I could not be more grateful for where my life is. And I guess to wrap it up with the fitness, for the record, I still do HIIT. I love HIIT. I teach at Orange Theory, but that's really 1 or 2 of my workouts a week. The majority of my workouts I balance it with the strength training 2 to 3 times a week. And my amazing client, Audrey, gifted me with the Disney half marathon. So catch me coming up these couple months to train for a half marathon. But my point is that, and yoga, of course, my training is much more balanced and it goes with the flow of both my cycle, because now I track my menstrual cycle in a big way. We've talked about that. And it is just gentle. If I need to take a rest day, I take a rest day. So anyhow, I am going to cut this off because I've been talking for a long time. Like I said, this one is much more of a rambly episode, but I do think it is valuable to hear about someone's experience, especially if we're new to fitness, because it's easy to hear someone say fitness is a lifelong thing. It's a different thing to see what 20 years of fitnessing looks like, and to know that there's so much that can change. The values I started fitness with are the things that I'm actively teaching against now, and the things I'm teaching about and learning now are the things that are going to keep me moving, and hopefully all my clients and loved ones and all you beautiful listeners moving far into whenever we want to stop doing it. So life's a journey. Expect it to change. Have fun along the way. And remember, at the end of the day, fitness and food are just tiny little pieces to your overall health puzzle. Remember that the people in your lives those are the moments that we don't get back. So go be of service and have fun and give someone a hug, whether it's your partner, your sister, your mom, or your dog. Give them a big old squeeze. All right, team, I hope, as always, you got a little something out of this. Like I said, we'll be back to our regularly scheduled programs. Thank you for walking down memory lane with me. If you have any questions or comments or just want to say hi, you can always hit me up at Kinsey@RaiderFitAcademy.com, or go ahead and leave a review on this podcast. As always, that's the best way for people to hear about and learn about this podcast. It is a grassroots project, and my goal is to have these resources available to women everywhere so that they can start taking care of their amazing, wonderful bodies. Until next time, Raiders, a-aroo.